Welcome to JHart Modelworks. In update number 4 on the Porsche 928 S4 by Italeri, I'm going to discuss the engine and transmission assembly, as well as some modifications, and then we're going to talk about the next steps on the build. Welcome to my workbench. Let's get started. Alright guys, so the engine is finished. So I started out assembling the engine block and the oil pan, as well as the transmission. You have right here, it's all finished and assembled. So I knew right off the bat that there's going to need to be some modifications done. So I started by cutting off there 4 little nubs on each side for the spark plugs. I cut those off, sanded them out, and then drilled them out for the boots. And then I took some 1mm evergreen plastic rod, drilled a 0.6mm hole in it, and bent it at a 90-degree angle to form my spark plug boots, and added some 28 gauge red electrical wire. I have some of this, as well as some black, that I use for wiring up LEDs and my sci-fi stuff. This stuff also makes great spark plug wire at 1/24 scale. If you ever really want to test your patience, drilling 6mm holes long ways into 1mm rod is definitely a good way to test that. The 928 has 2 distributors with 4 plugs on each side. There's one here and here. They're on the front plate for the engine part, but the original part is definitely too thin to drill and mount, especially 4 plugs in. So I took some 3.2mm plastic rod, flattened one side of it to get that D shape, and drilled out my 4 spark plug wires on the flat side. One of them I just drilled all the way through to make the opposite side for the distributor wire. While working on this, I also noticed that there's a mounting bracket for the AC compressor, but there's no actual compressor, so I used some more of the 3.2mm rod and just scratched one in. The next issue to tackle were these exhaust manifolds. I noticed the pipes on the headers were smooth, and they flush mounted to the 4 diamond-shaped surfaces on the block, which flush mounting with no location points typically doesn't go well. They get knocked off and broke somewhere. So I drilled one set of pipes on the 1 and 4 side, and the other one on the 1 and 3. I then glued some hard piano wire in with some CA glue, and I drilled the engine block for the respective ports. This way they have a firm mounting point. I don't have to worry about them ever being bumped or broken off from a weak glue bond. And because I staggered the ports, they could only go in one way. So I knew I would have them mounted on the correct sides. I didn't have to worry about getting them flipped over the wrong direction or anything like that. Another issue that I have with the kit is the master cylinder. Now the brake fluid reservoir and the brake booster are connected to the air intake part. And while technically that's not correct, I didn't really want to mess with cutting it off and remounting it to the firewall. However, the master cylinder itself was completely missing. So I grabbed some plastic rod and some 22 gauge jewelry wire and set to work. I used the 1.6mm rod for the body and drilled a hole in the brake booster and put a bit of wire out the back. That gave me a good secure mounting point. I then drilled 2 holes in the sides and used some 1.2mm rod on the jewelry wires to make everything got primed, painted, and assembled. I used some Tamiya LP38 flat aluminum for the block and the transmission. I then masked off the valve covers and sprayed them and the intake manifold with some LP48 sparkling silver, just to give it a little bit of tonal variation, just kind of make it look a little interesting. And the oil pan drain plug I masked off and painted with some Zero Paints pale gold, same color I used on the master cylinder, just to kind of make that look a little different. And the exhaust manifolds I sprayed with some Alclad exhaust manifold. I've been trying to move away from the Alclad paints, especially ever since I had some of their aluminum go bad. And when I sprayed it, it just turned into like a gray, like a flat gray, instead of being a metallic silver. But this exhaust manifold is like a perfect color for it's like a perfect match for what was on the original cars. I also had to carefully mask off and paint those 4 diamonds on the block, as those are actually part of the headers. Those are the parts that bolt into the actual engine block. In my opinion, they could have been molded onto the headers, but I guess it works for them to be molded onto the block as well. Pulleys I did in flat aluminum, and the engine face and the air intake I did in the LP5 semi-gloss black, and then did some additional detail painting with some Vallejo silver, some flat black, and I also masked off the alternator and sprayed that with some of the Zero Paint's pale gold. And with everything assembled and painted, I then was able to locate where the oil filter goes. There's not an oil filter in the kit, so I just scratch built one. I took some more of the 3.2 millimeter styrene rod, stuck it in my cordless drill, and kind of used that as like a mini lathe so I could thin some of it down. The oil filter on the 928 it's kind of long and thin. It's not like the normal short stubby Fram air filter oil filters you're used to seeing. I also took some 1.2 mil rod, very carefully drilled that out so that I could fit a oil dipstick, which I made from some of the really hard piano wire. It would be easier to have made it with jewelry wire, but the jewelry wire will bend. The hard piano wire is really hard to get bent like this, but once it's shaped, it'll stay that way. Got a little oil at the end of the dipstick there. I also took all the spark plug wires that I made and assembled those into harnesses using some phono etch wire looms here. Got some 4 on this side and 2 for these long on the backs. The way I did these is I just drilled these and then I made long 90-degree boots. That way I could just stick the 90-degree boots in there. These are actually not glued in place, but because of the long 90-degree boot in there and the way it is, I don't have to worry about this coming out. I don't have to worry about getting glue all over the engine. They just stay nice and clean. I did leave the distributor wires long. I need to add some boots to the distributor side end. Looking at the engine bay, it does not look like it has the sidewalls on the bay. I may try and scratch build some walls in. I probably won't. With that being the case, there's not really a place to put an ignition coil or anything like that, so I'll probably just trim these up a little bit and just stub them under the body so that you won't see where they go. One more little bit of detail that I added in here was this throttle body. On the top of this intake manifold, there's a small little tab that sticks out from the left-hand side, and that's where the throttle body sits. So what I did was I just took some soda aluminum, made some folds, drilled some holes, and I took some of the black 28 gauge electric wire and I stripped a bit of it off, which is kind of difficult because the wire strippers I do have are too large, so I have to kind of scrape it off. But I went ahead and I stripped back some of that wire and just kind of bent it in and glued it in place. But it kind of looks like a somewhat realistic throttle body, and I just kind of ran that down the back. There are going to be some additional hoses for like fluids and whatnot, maybe a fuel line or 2 and stuff like that, but that's going to have to wait until after I get everything set in place. And that pretty much has everything taken care of. I went ahead and sprayed the radiator. This is the LP5 semi-gloss black with some of the LP48 sparkling silver, and then just did a wash with some Tamiya Panaline accent color. So you get kind of that dirty radiator look to it, but it's still nice and shiny. Here's the air intake and our master cylinder. Like I said, it's not centered, but the way they attached it, they put the attachment point so that it attaches to this piece together, and that sits right in the way of trying to center it. So I got my package in from modelcarkit.com in the Czech Republic. And these are the decals that I picked up. I used several of them in my first attempts. I wasn't very good with it. They're basically just peel and stick, but the adhesive is very strong on these. So if you make a mistake, it's very hard to get them back up. You actually end up tearing them up trying to get them back off. But I do like the look that it gives, that 3D decal in there. And also in that package were my resin calipers from Hobby Design. The next steps on this build are going to be to do the suspension so that I can get, because the engine and the transmission mount to suspension pieces, so I can get the suspension, the drive shaft done, and get all of that put up into the chassis. I will probably leave the brakes off at that point for a couple of reasons. One, I want to do a video just on modifying the brakes, because there's a few things I'm going to do to the brakes. I don't do a lot of build video that much. I record with my phone. I don't have a good camera for recording, so I'm trying to get a feel for building, and I think, you know, doing it in smaller bits will kind of help me break into that a little bit. So I'm probably going to go ahead and do a build video on assembling the brakes just to get some practice there. But also I'm trying to wait on my wheels to come in from Fugu Garage, which are coming out of Russia. So that may take a little while. They've been sitting, moving between countries for a bit. But the reason I want to wait on these wheels is these are the Brembo Calipers from Hobby Design, and these are gorgeous. They're very nicely molded. I had an open set somewhere, but I don't know where I've placed it at the moment. But there's a little bit of concern with how these are going to fit with the wheels, as these are the ones I bought originally. Unpainted ones, so you can see, get some apples to apples comparison. Still equally well molded, still from Hobby Designs, but these are much skinnier. I don't know if you can see that real well. These are much skinnier than these other ones. There's easily a good 2 or 3 millimeters of difference there. So I may have to shave these down a little bit, and I want to get the wheels in so I can test fit. But that's where we're going to go from there. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider clicking the like button. Leave me comments below. I try to reply to all my comments. I love getting feedback from you guys. Tell me if you like the build. Tell me if there's anything you're looking forward to. If there's something you'd like to see, maybe I can look into doing a video on topics that y'all want covered. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button and clicking the bell icon so you can be notified when I release new videos. And as always, thank you for watching. Keep modeling and have a great day.